Welcome everyone. I'm about to get started on showing you some of the features of the internal male reproductive system. So to start off with, to give ourselves a little bit of context, we're going to create a urinary bladder. So the urinary bladder is a roundish structure. I'm actually going to make it a little bit larger for ease of viewing. So it's kind of it's normally just a hollow muscular bag, right? But when filled with urine, it can be kind of round. And so I'm going to put it on this little container to help us with 3 dimensions. The urinary bladder is, of course, collecting urine that is made by the kidneys that travels down through the ureters. So I'm crafting just the little beginnings of a couple of ureters here. And they enter on the posterior surface of the bladder, and they're going to be a little bit saggy. All right. So I know it looks kind of like a rabbit, but those are my 2 ureters coming into the posterior surface of the bladder. Here's my anterior surface of the bladder here. Once the urinary bladder stores urine, after a period of time when it gets full, it's going to send signals to the brain, and you're going to have that feeling that you need to urinate. And there are both involuntary and voluntary mechanisms involved with urination. And when the time comes, and it's appropriate, right, then urine will be released from the urinary bladder down through a tube called the urethra, right? That's going to move down and out. So that's kind of our basics of the urinary system. Now we have another system that is going to interface with this, which is the system that's making sperm, right? So you have testicles that are creating sperm, and they're located down in the scrotum. So they're going to have to get somehow up out of the scrotum and then enter the urethra, because they're ultimately going to leave the urethra out through the tip of the penis. So right now I'm creating hopefully two long, skinny tubes, maybe not so skinny so that they show up well, right, that are going to come from the testicles, which are going to be way down in the scrotum, up and behind. They go way up and behind the urinary bladder, like so. So we have 2 vas deferens, tubes leading up out of the scrotum, coming up into the pelvis, going back behind the urinary bladder. What they're going to encounter then are 2 sets of glands, which are going to create fluids that contribute to semen. So there are 2 glands that are perched on the posterior surface of the bladder here, and those are called the seminal vesicles. Now, as the vas deferens comes close to the seminal vesicles, it's actually going to widen a bit right here. And that widened part of the vas deferens is called the ampulla. So we have our vas deferens coming up over behind the bladder, widening into the ampulla, and then receiving secretions from the seminal vesicles. The seminal vesicles are creating fluid that is alkaline in pH, which will help buffer the sperm against the acidity of the vagina. It also contains fructose, the sugar, which serves as an energy source for the sperm, because they're going to have quite a workout ahead of them. As this tube continues down, now that we have the fluid from the seminal vesicles, it's going to continue to travel, and at this point we call this the ejaculatory duct. Okay, So it just changes name. It's really a continuation of the vas deferens just after it's received fluid from the seminal vesicles, and we call it the ejaculatory duct. It is then going to ultimately empty into the urethra here because the urethra does double function. It serves as both a tube for urine and then a tube for semen, which is the name for the fluid that has both sperm and the fluids from the glands. So the next gland that's involved in producing semen is called the prostate. And whereas for the seminal vesicles we had 2, for the prostate you only have 1 gland. And the prostate gland surrounds the urethra as it's leaving the bladder. So I'm going to change my setup here a little bit to give you an idea what that looks like. So here comes our urethra, right, out from the urinary bladder. Here comes our ejaculatory duct bringing sperm and fluid from the seminal vesicles, and it's going to travel through the prostate gland, right? So it would normally be like this. The prostate sits right inferior to the urinary bladder. If you look inside, you can see the urethra. This part of the urethra we call the prostatic urethra, and now you see why. And here's our ejaculatory duct. So as sperm and fluid from both the seminal vesicles and the prostate gland then continues to travel down into the urethra, we're going to encounter another set of glands. These are paired, so there's one on each side, just like the seminal vesicles, right? Unlike the prostate gland, which is single. And they're these little tiny pea-like glands with a little duct located here and here. So one on either side. I'm losing my ability to do 3 dimensions convincingly. There we go. These glands right here are called the bulbourethral glands. Think of it. They're like little bulbs that secrete fluid into the urethra. Now these glands aren't actually involved in contributing to the semen proper. What they do is they secrete a mucousy, slippery fluid into the urethra before ejaculation, thus kind of smoothing out the way, clearing out the urethra, acting like a Zamboni or the hose on a slip and slide to make sure that when it's time for ejaculation, everything can move easily. So that's our third set of glands. All of this part of the urethra then is traveling through some deep structures of the pelvis and is called the membranous urethra. So far we have the prostatic urethra, the membranous urethra, and now the urethra, which is either carrying urine or semen, depending on what's happening, is going to have to travel through the penis. And we're going to name it according to a certain structure in the penis through which it travels. So we're going to do a little bit of an aside now to do penis anatomy. Let's see what colors we should use. Okay. So the penis is really interesting for lots of reasons. But one of them is that it's actually composed of 3 separate columns of erectile tissue. So I'm using a different color now. 2 of these columns of erectile tissue I'm going to make the same color because they are the same structure, just one on each side. That one's a lot bigger. Let's try to make it a little bit more. Okay, we're almost there. Okay, so these 2 columns are on what in the flaccid state you would think of as the top side or the anterior or superior surface of the penis. The strange thing about anatomical position is that the penis is considered to be an anatomical position when it is erect. So the top surface of the penis, when it's flaccid or not erect, is actually called the dorsal surface of the penis. So we have these 2 columns of erectile tissue that sit on what we would think of as the top side of the penis. But they are anchored deep into the body. So they actually diverge and branch out to the side, kind of like this. And when it comes out to the side like this, that is called the crus of the penis, right? Singular is crus, crura is plural, so one and the other. Let's see if I can have, oh yeah, a little hand sanitizer bottle will do the trick here. All right, so the top surface of the penis is these two erectile columns of corpora cavernosa. That would be the plural. Singular, one of these columns is called a corpus cavernosum. The underside of the penis, however, is composed of a separate column of erectile tissue, and that's called the corpus spongiosum. So I'm going to go ahead and craft another one here. And the interesting thing about this one, and why I'm kind of making it flat like this, is because the urethra, excuse me, is going to travel through it. So if I was okay with ruining my modeling clay here, right, I would wrap this entirely around the urethra. It's kind of like a Twinkie where the cream is the urethra moving through the middle, right? And then this is the corpus spongiosum, which is a single column of erectile tissue. And when that comes in and anchors into the body, that is called the base of the penis. Okay? So, to review our structures for today, we have the vas deferens, which is bringing sperm up from the testicles, coming around the superior surface to the posterior surface of the urinary bladder, bringing sperm, which receives secretions from the seminal vesicles, two, one on each side. The continuation of the tube is then called the ejaculatory duct. That is then going to empty into the spongy urethra, which is surrounded by the prostate gland. So it then continues down into the membranous urethra, receives secretions from the two bulbourethral glands, and then continues down, and the spongy urethra, therefore, travels through the corpus spongiosum of the penis, which, where it anchors into the body, has the bulb of the penis, and on the top surface of the penis, which is officially called the dorsal surface, we have two corpora cavernosa, which branch out to the side, kind of like a wishbone, to further anchor the penis, and those are the corpora cavernosa. Don't forget urinary bladder, the ureters, which are bringing urine from the kidneys, and then of course right here, if this were a cross section, we would see the pubic symphysis, right? So there's the pubic symphysis, that anterior portion of the bony pelvis. All right, that's the internal features of the male reproductive system. I hope this was helpful and effective, and I'll look forward to meeting with you again soon.